So first of all, I want to say thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate that you guys took the time to be here. So we have a full house, and I know it's a nice warm day where you can be getting things done. So thank you. And also, I also want to thank our colleagues from MSU. So those of you that traveled from different parts of the state to be here, we're really grateful. If anything, I feel like SWD has brought us together in a lot of ways to try to figure out some answers and to set some priorities for each year. So this summit has really been critical for us and the research community to get feedback directly from growers that we can turn around and get some funding to continue to support the research that we do in hopes to turn around with some solutions for you guys. So again, thank you for being here. Juliana said I will talk about efficacy and also some orchard modification work. So I only have 15 minutes. I wanted to start with the orchard modification work because I think it's something that you guys could start implementing this winter. So this is work that we did here at the research station, as Bob mentioned. For those of you that don't know, we have just purchased 37 acres across the street. So it was a great benefit for us because we were able to pull off this research project that was really critical, and I think you guys are going to be pleasantly surprised with the data that we received. And I also want to say thanks to Phil Fanning and Rufus Isaac's lab. So this work was also, this orchard modification was also conducted in blueberry fields. So it was great to work with a good team. So our objective here was to establish some kind of reliable and cost-effective ways to modify the orchard landscape. So we're really interested in making these orchard landscapes less suitable for SWD. And so when Larry and I and a bunch of other research started talking, we were thinking about tart cherries are, it's kind of an older system. And so we have these SWD, their behavior is when it gets hot in the middle of the day, you know, do they fly to the woodlots or to the adjacent areas because they have not a lot of cover, the humidity drops. And I started thinking about our tart cherry systems. We're growing these trees on pretty big, on standard rootstocks. We have very big canopies. And I was just wondering if those SWD don't need to fly anywhere during the height of the day, could they stay there and cause damage, which John Wise talked about? Once they're in a canopy, they're nice and tucked in, do they start stinging pretty quickly and they don't need to move? So they're expending resources on laying eggs rather than traveling back and forth to find refuge during the heat of the day. So we have these trees with dense canopies, and then we also have our traditional sod row centers. So I'm just wondering if all these, this whole system we have is nice and humid and it's really conducive place for SWD. So we decided, we came up with the blueberry team on these orchard modification strategies. So we did pruning. So we did no pruning, 25% more and 25% less pruning. So when we did that, I went to Myron. So Myron works on our farm team. So he and Bill were really helpful in establishing this project. So most tart cherry growers, not all, there are exceptions out there, but they prune every 2 to 3 years. When they walk up to a tree, Myron thinks that roughly on average, he would take out every 2 to 3 years, 8 limbs. So what we did is take out 25% more than 8 limbs and 25% less than 8 limbs. So 6 and 10 limbs. And so that's how we set this up. And then we had something which was no pruning, and those trees hadn't been pruned in 3 years. We had under tree canopy modifications, wood chips, weed fabric, and then kind of what we called the grower standard. So you weed sprayed in June, and then there was minimal weed growth that come up after that. So it's kind of like what you guys always do. And then we tried to modify the orchard middles. So the first one we did sod row centers mowed every 2 weeks. So we had a dedicated team that would come through, mow every 2 weeks. We had sod row centers that were not mowed at all. So it was kind of like a jungle walking through there in the middle of the season. And we had a lot of rain this year. And then we had herbicide used to maintain bare ground throughout the season. So anytime we saw something green come up, Myron would go through and weed spray the sod row center again. And then we came up with this kind of tillage mechanism. So herbicide followed by tilling every 2 weeks. We burned everything down and then we'd come through and till up every 2 weeks. So it was kind of like a muddy mess a lot this summer. And then the other thing, I just know that we had no insecticide applications in these blocks. So the treatments were applied to a contiguous 150 trees. So it wasn't like a row, they were like big squares of 150 trees. And they were all on 15 to 17-year-old mods. We had data loggers, we had adult trap counts, we collected fruit every week until harvest. But then our harvest samples were actually collected off a shaker. So we were getting a fairly representative sample of fruit that you couldn't just grab by sight. Things were coming off the shaker, and we would take subsamples off the shaker. And then we also collected yields in those treatments. And then data that we won't show yet. There's a lot of data still that we're analyzing here. We took weekly vacuum samples. So we're trying to see how many SWD we could recover in these different systems. So this is just a visual. This is no pruning. You can see that's obviously a fairly dense canopy. 25% less pruning, so we removed 6 limbs, and then 25% more pruning, where we removed 10 limbs. Under tree canopy, just wood chips, weed fabric, and then the grower standard. And then again, sod row middle treatments, just what I talked about. So this is the kind of sheer volume we were collecting all the time. So we went through a lot of fruit. Bill almost killed us. I think we might have ruined the septic system running through these brown sugar tests, but we were sampling for a lot of larvae throughout the season. So this is what it looked like. This is just another shot. It was a well-oiled machine during the height of the season. And so here was what our results look like. So I was fairly encouraged by this. So I think this is pretty exciting. So this is the average number of SWD larvae in 3 gallons of fruit. You can see here, we did not prune those canopies, so they were fairly dense. We had about the average number of larvae were all close to 80, so 75 larvae compared to 25% less pruning or 25% more pruning, whether you took off 6 or 10 limbs. We had significant reductions in SWD, and this is with no insecticides at all. Just pruning alone made a difference here. I was interested in some work from the OARI group. They did this in blueberries, and then they looked at yields. So I think this is going to be important for management strategies in the long run. So 25% more pruning. Our average pound per tree was about 73 pounds per tree. If you took off 6 limbs, we're at 101, and then no pruning at all, which is obviously not sustainable, but you're going to have 132 pounds per tree. So there's some things that I think on the research side we're going to come up with, and we're going to this step 2 of this project next year, where we're going to address managing yield and SWD recommendations for pruning. So here's what we saw, the number of larvae in 3 gallons of fruit for weed fabric, wood chips, and herbicide. There's no statistically differences here. This is under tree canopy, and we collected the fruit out of the tree. So what was that under tree canopy impacting what was going on in the tree? So we saw no differences here statistically, even though numerically weed fabric looked lower. And then the last is the orchard row middle treatment. So again, number of larvae in 3 gallons of fruit, we mowed it every 2 weeks, no mowing, herbicide, and then that tilling process. And here's the really interesting thing. If you don't mow at all, you can see that that sod row center impacts what's happening up in the tree. So the number of larvae we're collecting out of the tree canopy is obviously significantly higher, almost 10 larvae in 3 gallons of fruit compared to mowing, herbicide, or tillage. So I think there's cultural practices that we can employ this year in 2018 that are going to help you, because this chemical solution I feel like is not getting us to where we need to go. So I think there's some things we can do culturally that are going to impact or minimize reductions. I also wanted to show these data. This is not a direct application, but I do think the canopy size makes a difference. So this is canopy. So this is in our untreated check in our efficacy trial. So this was conducted in trees that were 7 years old. They were adjacent to the trees that were not sprayed at all. And then you can see that the no pruning treatment, where we had all those larvae, so they had 75 larvae in 3 gallons of fruit with no pruning, and then in the untreated efficacy trial, we had 0.9 larvae. And so you're looking at these differences in tree age and canopy denseness. I think that canopy denseness alone makes some difference. This isn't a direct correlation because the trees in the efficacy trial, some of them were treated in that block, where the contiguous acreage in the other treatment were not treated at all. But I just bring this up to show that there are differences when you have this age of tree. So I think our conclusions here, I think pruning may be an affordable way to reduce your SWD. Removing 6 to 10 limbs reduced your SWD by 40%. Our data were collected in trees with no insecticide. That's what we're gearing up to do this year. I want to overlay the pruning treatments with insecticide applications and measure both coverage and then also measure just infestation. And then the trees we pruned last year, we're going to let them grow out to see what the implications of SWD are once your trees grow out after that kind of severe pruning. You know, your yield, it was reduced, but you're still going to need to prune. So I hope that we're going to be able to come up with annual recommendations to balance horticultural needs, your yield, and also SWD reductions. So, and then, you know, the other thing on the horticultural front that we've always been interested in is, you know, moving to more modern systems with higher density tart cherries, that there may be reasons to do that other than on the horticultural side. So this is some work that we have in some high density tart cherries with canopy measurements that we're going to start looking at SWD work in that block. So I think we came up with some recommendations that I think we should roll out for 2018. I think that if you got trees that haven't been pruned in 3 years, I would take out 3 of those major scaffolds. I would recommend that you hopefully can find some time to mow your orchards, those side row centers every 2 weeks. And then insecticide materials rated excellent, and then stretching insecticide intervals. And so I think Dave and Emily are going to talk about some of the work that we had on farm, that these are the recommendations I think that we're going to roll out for 2018. So again, we're going to repeat this stuff and work on this to expand these recommendations for 2018. Really briefly, I just want to say, I put my thank you slide in case I ran out of time, but Larry's lab, we had to bring in the troops to come up this summer to actually get the work done because we didn't physically have enough bodies. So Larry's group was great to do that. We had an awesome summer team, as usual. Karen always leads the charge on a great summer team. And then Project Green, Michigan Cherry Committee, Michigan State Hort Society, and then lastly, I just want to say thanks to the Michigan Tree Fruit Commission. So they were really integral in helping figure out, you know, how we might purchase the property across the street where we actually did this work. And so really this work couldn't have been done without those new orchards. So it was really integral and important to have that. So do I have, I have time? Okay, quickly, insecticide treatments. I'll just go over these efficacy treatments. This is a mouthful, this slide alone, but we had actually 14 different treatments and again, this was done across the street because we ran out of trees last year to do this work. So we had 14 insecticide treatments with your untreated check. And the thing that I wanted to point out, so we had Larry and I and Emily and some other folks sat down and came up with some programs, but the one I thought were kind of interesting is we really tried to do some of these tank mixes at 10-day intervals. So that's a message we heard from you guys at the summit last year. Tired or you're just tired in general. And so what this is going to do is try to give you 3 more of these insecticide tank mix applications. So that was really directly from you guys trying to give you guys a break here. So these are the insecticide treatments, the data. I'm going to present this at Orchard Show, and you can call me anytime. But these data look pretty good. But the thing that I just really can't get quite out of my head yet is this work was done on 7-year-old trees with relatively good canopies. So I think we already got really good or less in SWD because of the size of the trees. So our numbers here, even the untreated check, this would be at the harvest timing. So the 24th of July, we only had in 3 gallons of fruit, 5.5 larvae. I say only, but in the other treatments where those trees were 15 years old, we had 75 larvae. So the numbers were really different. So I'm just saying, if we look at where we had no larvae at all, a delegate imidan danitol, an exerol imidan exerol, and then we have one of those tank mix combinations at 10-day intervals. So, you know, when we looked at these data, one of the things is I think that maybe our infestations didn't come till later. So I'm not really sure about these first applications. I don't think they were the make or breakers. And so I think the work next year that we really need to do is when do you start spraying? That's what the work is. When do you need to start spraying? And I've already talked to Ty Donhorn. We're going to develop some kind of color strategy to figure out when they become susceptible. So a quantitative way that we might measure that so we know when they become susceptible, and that's when you start spraying. And then, Karen, you can stop trapping. So I think that's where we're going this year. So I was really surprised with this. And then again, we came back 1 week post-harvest, so this would have been 2 weeks after insecticide applications had been put on. Again, we get this imidan-danitol treatment. And I think these 3-day treatments really here, I think they really made a difference. And so Exerol, imidan, you can see kind of the usual suspects keep coming to the top here. But then again, you get these 10-day interval treatments that they do seem to be working. So I can't say that it's a slam dunk, but we were thinking we're optimistic we might get 10 days if you've got a really open canopy with these tank mix applications. I wouldn't say I'm recommending those yet by any means, but I would like to repeat the data for next year. So quickly, all treatments were significantly different in the untreated check at that harvest sample timing. So again, kind of looking at what Phil's doing, I don't think we have resistance issues, and I still think we've got good materials out there. Why we have what John Wise described as all of a sudden infestations, I think is we got to figure out when to pull the trigger. And so all these were the good ones. Jet Ag, Larry talked about this a little bit, and I'll just summarize. Jet Ag is a disinfectant. I'm pretty optimistic about this. So Jet Ag disinfects, it takes the yeast off the trees. We saw Jet Ag at a 1% solution, followed by Delegate, improved Delegate compared to Delegate alone. And we just used Delegate because it was not as good as some of the other materials. It just gives us a baseline. I'm really eager to start working with this Jet Ag again in our other treatments. And so this is a direction we're going to go with Efficacy next year. And like Larry said, he's not given up on yeast yet either. But right now at this point, we didn't see that the yeast improved the efficacy yet. But that verdict is still out. And then 1 week post-harvest, sample Delegate, imidan, Delegate. Danitol was numerically the best, but we still got some good things going on. And I think it's worth exploring on smaller canopies, these tank mix at 10-day intervals. So that's quickly a mouthful with insecticide efficacy, but we'll be going through this again throughout the winter.